Why does it hurt so much when someone you care about doesn't even bother to reach out? You stare at your phone again. Nothing. No missed calls, no texts, no voice note, not even a hey. And deep down something sinks. It's not just disappointment. It's a quiet, heavy kind of pain. The kind that whispers maybe you're not important enough, maybe she's moved on. Or worse, maybe she never cared as much as you did. You try to ignore it, tell yourself it's not a big deal. She's just busy, you say. She'll reply later. But you know the truth. You've been the one holding it all together. You're always the one who texts first, always the one who reaches out, always trying, always hoping. And it's exhausting. You start to question yourself. Was I too eager, too available? Did I scare her off? But that's not what this is about. This isn't about one message or one conversation. This is about feeling like you don't matter enough for someone to make an effort. And that realization, it hits hard. But here's something you need to understand. This pain you're feeling, it's not here to break you. It's here to wake you up, to shake you out of the illusion that your value depends on someone else's attention. Because it doesn't. Her silence isn't a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of her choices, her priorities, her level of interest. And yes, that stings. But what hurts even more is continuing to give your energy to someone who doesn't return it. Because every time you chase someone who isn't chasing you back, you lose a piece of yourself. So what do you do when she never calls? When she never texts? When the silence becomes louder than her presence ever was? You stop waiting. You stop hoping that maybe today will be different. You stop handing over your power in the form of unread messages and unanswered calls. You stop living in reaction to her actions, or lack of them. And you start choosing yourself, because there's something powerful about a man who no longer waits to be chosen. A man who decides to shift his focus inward, who invests his energy into building, not begging, who understands that real love doesn't leave you guessing, that real connection feels mutual, not one-sided, not forced. And here's the truth. The moment you stop chasing what isn't meant for you is the moment life starts giving you what is. That's why you need to keep watching. Because what comes next isn't just advice, it's transformation. If you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever wondered why you're always the one who cares more, this will hit deep, and it will give you something even more valuable than answers. It will give you clarity, strength, direction. You're not here to beg for attention. You're here to become the kind of man who never needs to. You're not crazy for wanting to feel wanted. Every human being craves connection. We're wired for it. So when someone you care about goes silent, when they never reach out, it doesn't just confuse you, it hurts. It creates this space inside you that feels empty, like something's missing. You start to believe that maybe if you do more, give more, show more interest, they'll finally see your worth. But all that does is deepen the ache, because no matter how much you give, it still feels one-sided. You wonder why you're the one thinking about her, wondering how her day is, missing her voice, while she's out there not even thinking about whether you're okay. That's what starts to wear you down. Not just the silence, but the imbalance. You keep showing up for someone who doesn't even notice you're there, and you tell yourself you're being patient, that maybe she's just not good at texting, that maybe she has a lot going on. But at some point you have to stop making excuses for someone else's indifference, because every time you do, you train yourself to settle. You teach your own mind that it's okay to be ignored, to be a second thought, to be optional. But you are not optional. You are not someone who should have to beg to be seen. The moment you begin to understand that, everything begins to shift. You stop living in emotional survival mode. You stop obsessing over every little thing she does or doesn't do. You stop holding your breath waiting for her to remember you exist. What you're feeling isn't weakness. It's a response to inconsistency. Your brain is caught in a loop. It's called intermittent reinforcement, the same psychology used in slot machines. When a reward comes only sometimes, it becomes more addictive than if it came all the time. You text her, and when she finally replies, it lights up your brain. Just a hey and you feel seen again, but the moment passes and she disappears. And you're right back where you started, waiting, overthinking, craving her attention like it's the only thing that can make you feel whole. But you don't need her message to feel whole. What you need is to break the pattern, to step out of the mental casino and take back control. You are not someone's backup plan. You are not here to be tolerated. You are not here to chase moments of approval like a reward. What you seek in her attention is really something deeper. You want to feel valued, significant, chosen. But chasing that from the outside will always leave you empty, because the feeling you're searching for doesn't come from someone else's text. It comes from how you choose to see yourself. You want a woman who sees you, appreciates you, and meets your energy. But to attract that, you have to first stop chasing someone who doesn't. You have to become the version of yourself who no longer accepts crumbs just to feel loved. You don't need her silence to finally prove your worth. You already have it. The moment you stop chasing is the moment you start healing. This isn't about playing games. This is about protecting your peace. This is about rising above emotional dependency and stepping into emotional power. That's where your freedom lives. And that's where your transformation begins. Every time you reach out first, you send a silent message, not just to her, but to yourself. And whether you realize it or not, that message sounds like this: you're allowed to ignore me, and I'll still show up. You think you're being strong, being persistent, being understanding. But what you're actually doing is training both your mind and hers to accept the bare minimum. You can't keep asking why she doesn't value you if you're the one who taught her that she doesn't have to. Respect doesn't begin with someone else. It begins with what you accept. Every call you initiate, every text you send after silence, every time you tell yourself, "It's fine, I'll try again tomorrow," you're quietly placing her above yourself, above your peace, above your standards, and over time, that's how you lose you. She's not wrong for not texting. She's showing you who she is. But you become wrong for continuing to respond to what clearly isn't reciprocated. You're not being ignored by accident. You're being placed exactly where you've allowed yourself to be. And that's the harsh truth most people avoid, because it's easier to blame than to take responsibility for our own patterns. But when you realize that you've been teaching her how to treat you, something inside you starts to shift. You begin to feel the frustration not just with her, but with yourself. Not because you're weak, but because deep down, you know you deserve better. You know that being available all the time hasn't made her value you more. It's made her see you as a guarantee, not a gift. Love should never feel like a performance. You shouldn't have to earn affection by proving yourself, by chasing, by always being the first to reach out. Because the more you do that, the more she starts to expect it, and the less she feels she has to do in return. This is where you need to pause and ask yourself one powerful question. If someone showed up in your life the way you're showing up in hers, what would that say about them? Would you respect someone who ignored every sign and still begged for a chance to be seen? You're not desperate, but your actions have started to reflect desperation. And it's time to cut that cord. Because the more you reinforce this pattern, the further you drift from your own dignity, from your self-worth, from your strength. You teach people how to treat you by what you tolerate. You teach people what your silence means, what your effort is worth. And if you're constantly available for someone who is barely there, you are not being loving. You're being lost in a cycle of self-abandonment. This ends when you make a new choice, when you draw the line and decide that your energy, your presence, your time, they are no longer free for someone who doesn't value them, not out of spite, not to manipulate, but out of deep, unshakable respect for yourself. You want her to notice you? Start by noticing yourself. Start by standing in your value, even when it's uncomfortable. Even when it means silence in return. Because when you finally stop teaching people to overlook you, you start teaching the world how powerful it is when a man remembers who he is. You keep telling yourself that if you stop reaching out, you'll lose her. That if you don't check in, if you don't send that one last message, she'll slip away for good. But if someone disappears the moment you stop chasing them, they were never really with you in the first place. That fear you feel, that tight knot in your chest, it's not about her. It's about what you've attached to her. The hope, the validation, the idea that maybe, just maybe, she's the one who will finally see you. The one who will finally choose you back. But clinging to a connection that requires you to abandon yourself is not love. It's survival. It's fear of being alone dressed up as loyalty. You've convinced yourself she's the only one who understands you. The only one you really vibe with. The only one who made you feel something real. And maybe that's true, but if it was real, it wouldn't be this one-sided. It wouldn't be filled with second-guessing, overthinking, and emotional exhaustion. Real doesn't ignore you. Real doesn't leave you wondering where you stand. Scarcity thinking makes you believe she's rare, that if you let her go, you'll never find anything like her again. But when you stop operating from fear, you start seeing clearly she's not rare. Your standards have just been low for too long. You've been starving for connection, and when you're starving, even crumbs look like a feast. You need to remember something that the world rarely teaches you. Walking away from someone who doesn't match your effort is not a loss. It's a graduation. It's a decision to stop begging for love and start becoming the kind of person who only entertains mutual energy. Someone who doesn't chase, not because they're arrogant, but because they know what they bring to the table. They know that presence isn't cheap, and access to their life must be earned, not assumed. Right now, your mind is trying to convince you that silence from her means emptiness in your life. But the truth is, your life has space, and space is where better things begin. When you stop filling the void with people who don't value you, you start making room for the ones who will. You open the door for peace, clarity, self-respect. And you close the door on confusion, anxiety, and emotional chaos. You are not meant to live in a state of waiting. You are not meant to spend your energy chasing people who never look back. You are meant to lead, to stand, to move forward with or without the response you hoped for. And when you do that, when you stop operating from fear and start acting from power, everything shifts. She may notice your silence, or she may not, but that's not the point. The point is that you noticed you. You chose you. And that's where all change begins, not when someone finally texts you back, but when you stop needing them to. Because real power doesn't come from being wanted. It comes from knowing you're worthy, even when no one says it out loud. Especially then. You weren't made to chase what doesn't choose you. That was never your role. Deep down you feel it, that inner pull, the part of you that knows you were meant for more than unanswered texts and one-word replies. That part of you is your truth. The problem is you've been silencing it for too long. You've been shrinking to keep the connection alive, playing small. Holding back your full self in the hope that maybe, if you're just patient enough, she'll come around. But the truth is, when you're always the one chasing, you stop being seen. You start becoming invisible in the very place you're trying hardest to be noticed. It's time to shift, from chaser to creator, from reaching out to rising up. You don't attract respect by demanding it, you attract it by embodying it. When you operate from a place of grounded purpose, you stop needing someone else to validate your worth. You stop begging for breadcrumbs because you're too busy building something real. Your focus changes, your energy changes. And when your energy changes, everything else follows. This is where masculine energy becomes your anchor. Not force, not control, not pretending you don't care, but direction, presence, boundaries, the kind of stillness that speaks louder than noise, the kind of self-respect that makes you magnetic, not because you're trying to impress, but because you've stopped trying altogether. That's what draws people in. Not neediness, not overgiving, but alignment. A man who knows where he's going, who isn't thrown off course by silence or rejection, who doesn't crumble when someone doesn't see his value because he sees it for himself. Let her wonder where you went. Let her feel your absence. But don't do it to manipulate her. Do it to return to yourself, because this journey you're on, it was never about getting her attention. It's about giving your own attention back to the man you've been neglecting, the man with ambition, the man with discipline, the man who doesn't check his phone 10 times an hour hoping for a reply because he's too busy becoming the version of himself who no longer needs one. When you rise into your purpose, people feel it. They sense the shift. Some will be drawn in, others will fall away, and that's how it's supposed to be. You don't need to hold on to anyone who doesn't naturally stay. You don't need to chase what's real. You don't need to force what flows when it's meant. Let go of the illusion that says your happiness depends on whether she texts you first. It doesn't. Your happiness lives in your discipline, in your growth, in your vision. And every time you choose that path, you take your power back. This is the moment. Not to send another message, not to prove your worth to her, but to return fully to the man who doesn't wait to be chosen, because he already chose himself. And from that place, the right people won't need to be convinced. They'll recognize your value, and they'll rise to meet it. You don't need more proof. You already feel it in your gut. the imbalance, the inconsistency, the quiet disappointment that never seems to go away. And yet, part of you keeps hoping that maybe the next time you reach out she'll match your effort, that maybe this time she'll realize what you're worth. But deep down, you know the truth. People don't change when you keep making it easy for them to stay the same. The more you give to someone who doesn't meet you halfway, the more invisible you become. You're not being strong by holding on. You're not being loyal by accepting less. You're just slowly losing connection to the man you were meant to be. The one who walks with standards, who moves with clarity, who refuses to negotiate his worth in exchange for temporary attention. There's nothing noble about tolerating disrespect. There's no prize for being the one who stays committed when the other person stopped showing up a long time ago. All it does is send a message to your own mind that this is the best you can get, that silence is acceptable, that confusion is love, and once your mind starts to believe that, your standards begin to erode. You stop asking for more. You stop expecting effort. You lower yourself just to keep a place in someone's life who wouldn't even notice if you pulled away. And the worst part, you start to forget what real connection even feels like. But it's not too late, because the moment you stop hoping for a change outside of you and start creating a shift within you, everything starts to realign. You stop being reactive. You stop being dependent. You stop living in emotional scarcity and step into emotional power. When you raise your standards, you don't lose people. You lose the ones who were never meant to stay. You filter out the ones who are only there because you were easy to reach, easy to use, easy to ignore. And what you gain is worth far more than a return text. You gain peace, strength, integrity. Start holding yourself to a higher standard, not just in who you allow in your life, but in how you allow them to treat you. Your time is not cheap. Your presence is not a placeholder. You're not here to audition for someone who doesn't see your value unless you remind them. That's not love. That's emotional debt. Let them go. Not because you don't care, but because you care too much about yourself to stay where love has to be chased. Because the man who stops begging for attention is the man who starts attracting respect. And the second you realize that, you'll never go back to proving yourself again. You're not the one who got left behind. You're the one who finally walked away, not with bitterness, not with ego, but with the quiet confidence of someone who knows exactly what he brings to the table and will no longer sit where his presence is overlooked. This is where your story changes, not when she texts back, not when she finally sees your worth, but when you do. You don't heal by holding on. You heal by letting go of what no longer serves you, especially the habits, the patterns, the people who keep you stuck in a cycle of almosts and maybes. That cycle of waiting for her to care the way you do, hoping that silence will suddenly turn into presence, holding your breath for a message that never comes. That's not connection. That's emotional starvation, and it ends when you decide to feed your soul something real. There's a version of you who doesn't flinch when the phone stays quiet, who doesn't base his self-worth on whether or not someone else remembers to check in. That version of you is stronger than the craving, louder than the doubt. That version doesn't chase because he knows what flows will find him, and what runs was never meant for him in the first place. You become that version not by waiting, not by wishing, but by turning all that energy you were giving to someone else and pouring it back into yourself, into your health, into your mindset, into your mission, into building a life so full, so purpose-driven, that silence becomes irrelevant, because your own voice is finally louder than the noise of absence. Rejection doesn't define you. Being ignored doesn't reduce your value. If anything, it reveals your strength. It shows you who's not capable of holding your heart. And that's a blessing in disguise, because every time someone pulls away, they make space. And that space is where the right people can finally enter. But only if you stop blocking the door with your desperation for the wrong ones to stay. Let her go. Not out of spite, not to prove a point, but because peace is more important than proving your worth to someone who never saw it. Let her go so you can finally hold on to your standards, so you can reclaim your time, your energy, your power. Because the more you chase her, the further you get from yourself. And the further you get from yourself, the harder it becomes to recognize what real love even looks like. You weren't meant to live on edge, constantly questioning where you stand. You weren't designed to beg for scraps of attention like they're signs of affection. You were made to lead, to love from overflow, not emptiness. And if someone can't meet you in that space, with respect, effort and clarity, then they don't belong next to the man you're becoming. This isn't the end of anything. This is the beginning of everything. The beginning of a new standard, a new level, a new version of you who doesn't explain his worth, doesn't negotiate his value, and doesn't shrink to stay in someone's life. A man who stops asking, "Why doesn't she text me first?" and starts living a life so full of purpose that the right people feel inspired to match his energy, not ignore it. This is the shift. This is where you rise. Not because she finally sees what she lost, but because you finally remember what you had all along. Something went wrong while generating the response. If this issue persists, please contact us through our help center at help.openai.com.